run picking the older children up from school, and we've had a really lovely day so far. I've just got to make the tea and have a little bit of special time with a couple of my little ones. We had some special time for the older ones yesterday. So yes, and then it will be the end of the day and I can put my feet up and relax a little bit, do a little bit of writing, I think. But yes, we've had a really lovely afternoon. We went to the woods and did a bit of volcano erupting and some flint napping as well. The girls played in the hammocks and I drank tea. So it was lovely. It was very nice. And the sun was shining, the weather was nice, the birds were singing. So all good. Come home feeling really refreshed actually, really calm. I hope it lasts. So I just wanted to talk a little bit from my last video. I was talking about good books and living books and how they complement my homeschool read aloud part of the day. And I wanted to just explain what they were and give you a few examples of some of the books that we've read over the past and more recently, some that we're actually reading at the moment, in case you want to give them a go. Everybody is different, and I think that your child, you know, is so unique. What works for us and what we've enjoyed might be the complete opposite, might be your child's worst nightmare. So go with what works for you, absolutely. But just to give you some ideas, so the first thing is living books. A living book is basically a phrase, I think, or a term that was coined by Charlotte Mason. And for those of you who have been looking into homeschooling or have been home educating for quite a while, you will have heard of Charlotte Mason and the Charlotte Mason method of home educating. And basically Charlotte believed in providing children with books that weren't dumbed down to a child's level, that were written by people who had either experienced something firsthand, the thing that they were talking and writing about, or had a very, very deep knowledge and passion for the subject that they were writing about. And so, for example, they are written in a way that a child will become drawn in. So children love stories, so a lot of living books are written in the style of a story. So it works really well with history. One of our favourite books is a book called Our Island Story. And this is by a lady called H.E. Marshall. And it's basically, Our Island Story is a book about Great Britain and the stories, the historical stories, legends, myths and factual events that have taken place. And it's written in such a way that the child believes they're just being read a story. And so they can enjoy it rather than it being very textbooky, dry, nothing but facts. A living book will perhaps talk more about the feelings and the emotions, or be a little bit more descriptive with the atmosphere or the surroundings or the person's description that they're actually talking about. And I find they work really, really well. Another fantastic teacher and author is Charles Kovacs, and I've only recently discovered Charles Kovacs's books through looking into a Waldorf inspired education for my girls. As I've said before on previous videos, we are very eclectic, so we kind of take a little bit from everything that we enjoy and leave the rest. And that is exactly what I would recommend you do. Just because I like something doesn't mean you need to rush out and buy it or implement it into your home learning. These purely and simply just our take on it. But to give you an example, the Botany Study that Charles Kovacs does begins with a story of the plant between the sun and the earth, and he takes you through then to the dandelion, and he tells the story about the dandelion, and then again through to fungi, or fungi, however you want to pronounce it, fungi. And he then talks about how the fungi are the babies of the plant world, and he describes how that is so and why that is so. And he moves through to algae and the ferns, and it just goes on and on. But the chapters are so short, so inviting, and written in such a way that it's like they're being told by a storyteller. It's like Hans Christian Andersen is sitting there himself, or the Brothers Grimm, or somebody, whoever your favourite child author is that you just absolutely love. It's like they are there reading or writing to your child through these stories. We're actually using geology and astronomy at the moment through Charles Kovacs, and again, you know, he starts off with the children of the earth and moves on to the mountains, and young and old rocks, but he describes, he kind of puts like little fables in there and little snippets of mythology, but all written in a story type way. Very good. The way that it works is quite miraculous, really. The children do seem to really enjoy it. Certainly mine do, and I've got an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old. I want to give you more of an example. So, for example, he talks about the first rocks, and he says when a house is built, the first thing is that a foundation is laid for the house. The foundation carries the whole weight of the house. Granite, the oldest of rocks, is the foundation, the mighty giant that carries all other stones, rocks, earth and seas on its back. And so the story unfolds. So that's really what I mean by living books, books that are written by people who are passionate about what they're interested in, and passionate in passing that knowledge on, written in a way for children to understand that hasn't been dumbed down, but that gives them all the facts through storytelling. So then I wanted to talk to you about some good books. So good books is a term or a phrase used to describe wholesome books with good messages for your children. I am not opposed to a Horrid Henry or a Rainbow Fairy or a Magic Animal Friends book. None of these books are bad books. But I would say that for my read alouds, I would be choosing what I consider to be good books. So plenty of rich storylines, good morals and values portrayed by the characters, exciting plots, little bit of perhaps suspense or threat, something to keep my child interested without setting bad examples. So good characters within the books. Now, one of the first books that we read like this was The Courage of Sarah Noble, and this is by a lady called Alice Dalgleish, and it's set in 1707, so it's quite an old book. It was written a long time ago. Let me see if I can find out when it was first published. 1954, by the looks of it. It's a very sweet book about a little girl and her father who go off into the forest in search of a new place to live, and then the rest of the family will follow. And Sarah Noble's mother has sent Sarah with the father because she needs to stay at home with the other children, and she when I have finished my video, we will have a shower, okay? Okay? So, yes, Sarah has gone with her father, and her mother tells her to be brave because there are going to be challenges. This book is probably as exciting as it's going to get for perhaps a 6 to 8 year old. It's not extremely thrilling, but it reads well, it reads quickly, it's very sweet, it is religious in some ways. Sarah mentions God, possibly prays, thinks about God, but we loved it. We really loved it. The way that I approach religion in our house, being fairly omnistic myself, is that we live in a humongous world full of a rainbow colour of people, and we all need to learn how to respect one another, and learning what's important to each other and our own individual races, religions, traditions, morals, values. Learning all these different things is, for us, is not something that I wish to shy away from, because I want my children to be able to function in such a varied society and such a progressive society as that we're in today. And so I have no issue with reading stories that contain religious words, sentences in them, because we know what we believe, and my children are encouraged to believe what they want to believe. And so it just sparks conversation. You know, if Sarah is praying to God, which I don't think she actually sits down and prays, but I think she kind of whispers something to God. You know, if she's doing that, then if my girls are interested as to why she might be doing that, then that's something that we'll talk about. So I don't really see that the book itself it's not pushing religion on my child. It's opening them up to a world full of people that are all different, and learning how to embrace that. So we enjoyed The Courage of Sarah Noble. As I say, it's quite a sweet book. It's not the most thrilling, but the characters are wholesome, and there's quite a lot to talk about in it, because Sarah is afraid of the what are termed, I believe, as the Red Indians. They may be termed as, not necessarily politically correct, but again, a conversation in itself. And she is fascinated by them, and they become really good friends, which why wouldn't they? And so it reads really well. So that was one of the ones that we enjoyed first, when we first started looking for really good books, quick short reads that we could get through in a couple of days. One of the ones that I mentioned on my last video that I also described as very sweet and kind of uneventful was Sarah Plain and Tall. I don't know if I would recommend it, because I think children today may possibly find it rather dull. Not a lot happens in it. I kind of feel like it's more of a book for the adult reading it. It actually brought a tear to my eye at the end of it. It's about, so Sarah Plain and Tall, I think it might be a series, but it's been written by Patricia McLaughlin, and it's a puffin book we've got here. And it's about how the father has lost his wife, and he needs a new wife to help him around his small holding, his little ranch, and also to help him with his two children, one of whom remembers the mother fondly, and the other one who was too young to remember. Possibly she died in childbirth, not long after the second child was born. And so the father puts an ad in the shop, and along comes Sarah, and she's plain and tall. And it's the reason why it's so sweet is because you can see this kind of slow, gentle learning who each other are from Sarah and the father, and how nervous they are around each other, and how Sarah misses where she lived. and then the children begin to worry that she will leave because she misses where she lived, and that she doesn't love them enough to stay, which obviously, as stories tend to turn out all right, she does end up staying. Of course, she loves them dearly, and the father and her do fall in love, and it's just very lovely. Yes, it does really have a feel as if it's a story for the grown-up reading the story to the child. My girls enjoyed it. They weren't bouncing up and down in their seats, but we did enjoy it. I'm pretty sure that there is a second one to this, but we didn't go for that because I thought it was as gentle as it was going to get. So we enjoyed that one. That was another really good book with wholesome characters. The next one that we read was The Big Wave by Pearl S. Book, and this is another one that made me cry. This is, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I'm reading them out loud to the children. This book is about two boys and their families who one lives by the ocean and the other lives further up into the mountains, and it's set in Japan, I believe, yes, on the side of a mountain, and the tsunami comes and takes away one of the families, and one of the boys, who is good friends with the boy who lives by the ocean, who is good friends with the boy who lives further up the mountain, goes to live with his friend and his friend's family. Hello? Yes, we will have shower when I've finished. I've got 4 more books to show. Okay? Yeah. Are you sitting down too? Okay. So, yes, so one of the boys goes to live with his friend because he's lost his family. And he grows up with them. There is, further up the mountain, there is a very wealthy man who wanted to adopt the boy, but he chooses to stay with his family, his new family. And then the ending is really lovely because the boy is drawn back to the sea regardless of the threat that was there, and the threat of another tsunami that could happen at any point. Are you showing the books too? Yeah. So it's really, really lovely, and it's quite a heart-wrenching tale. It's very short, but it's quite a heart-wrenching tale. And the father of the boy whose family weren't affected by the tsunami in such a catastrophic way, he has such good advice, and the way that he speaks, it's a very good book, and it did make me cry as I read it. Maybe that's just me, but it did make me cry. Another book that we read was 20 and 10. Now, 20 and 10 is by, I'm going to pronounce this wrong as well, oh no, Claire Hutchett Bishop, illustrated by William Pendubois. And this is about, during the German occupation of France, 20 French children are brought to refuge in the mountains, I believe, yes, in the mountains, to stay in a convent, and there is a nun that is looking after them. And this was a really exciting story for the girls. Again, as I say, I've got an 11 and a 7-year-old, and it was very exciting because the children have to, the nun has been intercepted in the village because they are hiding also some Jewish children who shouldn't be there, and she has been intercepted in the village when she went to get the groceries. So the children then have to hide and negotiate with some German soldiers who come upon them, and they have to wait it out. It's a very good book, very exciting, and we really enjoyed it. One that we've just read recently is The Light at Turn Rock by Julia L. Soir. And this is a story, this is another sweet story. So it's about a grandma or an auntie. I want to say she's his auntie. I think she is. So there's a little boy and his elderly lady friend, who end up having to go and stay at the lighthouse on Turn Rock, because they're kind of tricked into it by the full-time lighthouse keeper. He wishes to spend some time with his family, and the only way that he can do that is if somebody covers him, but he wants to be gone for longer than he thinks these people will be prepared to look after the lighthouse, so he kind of dupes them into it, and they find out, and the little boy becomes quite cross that he's got to spend Christmas then stuck in the lighthouse. And it talks you through the how they clean the lighthouse, how they the procedure that they go through for lighting the lamp, the importance of it and why, and the little boy's feelings about it all and around the man who has tricked them, because he gets very angry, but his aunt or grandma is then doing her best to kind of bring him out of that so that they can enjoy a Merry Christmas together. So that was quite a nice quick read as well. And then finally, I wanted to talk to you about our latest love, which is these Little House books. Now, I did say at the end of my last video, you need to be careful with these, because I was quite horrified as I started to read Little House in the Big Woods by, it's Laura Ingalls Wilder. They're not particularly politically correct. There is the use of some racist language within the books. So you might say, well, why on earth would you consider that to be a good book? And why would you want to read it to your children? Because there's a lesson in everything. And just because I'm not necessarily comfortable with the wording within the book doesn't mean that we can't turn that into a good experience and discuss why on earth we would not use some of these words now, why they were used, and where we've come from and where we have grown and progressed into now. These books are amazing. If your child likes being out in nature, bushcraft, just the great outdoors, aspires to adventure, to live off grid, these books are brilliant. They suit our family down to a T. They are fabulous. So Little House in the Big Woods starts with the introduction to Laura and her family. She has two sisters, an older and a younger one, a mum and a dad, and they all live in a nice little cabin in the woods. And the father goes out and works in the woods, providing for the family, and it talks you through every single aspect of that in a nice, clean way. So there is hunting in it, and it's described the process of how the family uses the carcass, and in all ways, the skins, the bladders, everything is all gently described through this story. And so they have little mini adventures. The girls are very young. At certain times of the year they can't even play outside, so it talks about the things that they do, and the father plays the fiddle in the evenings. It's all very kind of, if you've seen this series on TV years ago, you'll know exactly what, thank you River, you'll know exactly what to expect with these. It's very kind of, I would describe it like the Waltons, you know. So there is hunting. They prepare meat for, basically they prepare enough food so that they can dry stuff, make cheese, use things for clothing to carry them right through the winter time, and then the spring season brings again new fruits from the land. Hello. Another one that just ends really lovely, and kind of, it was quite poignant how Laura can't believe that anything will ever change from how it is now. And she says, this is now, and this is how it's always going to be. And of course, as adults, we know that time doesn't stand still, and the children grow, and the family decides to do different things with their lives. And then you end up with the next book, which is Little House on the Prairie. Actually, that's book number 3. There is a book in between, Farmer Boy, I think it's called, but we've skipped straight to it, not for any particular reason, just because the girls wanted to know what was going to happen next with Laura and her family. So, you know, there's adventures with bears. There is the whole description of how the families entertained themselves all those years ago. People would come from miles around to have a party after harvest and so on. It's just such a great book. It's full of information on how things were done, how people lived back then in this area of the world, which is obviously America, and how food was prepared, how they survived, how the kind of work that they did, the clothes that they wore, what they did for the entertainment, and so on. So really enjoyed Little House in the Big Woods. And then finally, as I say, we've moved on to Little House on the Prairie. Now, we've only got a few chapters into this. The pictures are really lovely. Oops. Sorry about that, we're just losing battery there. So the pictures are really lovely in these books, and we've now moved on to Little House on the Prairie. The family have sold their big house in the woods, and they're moving cross state for a new life, and already they're encountering adventures. They think that they've lost along the way their faithful dog, and suddenly he turns up. He's followed them across the river. They don't know how he's managed it, because he was tired, and they waited for him for a little while, but they actually thought he'd died. And then he turns up. They waited for a few days because they were tired and wanted to kind of make camp for a while, and they were all really subdued and sad at the loss of their faithful friend. And then lo and behold, he turns up, and my girls were just kind of like, yes, you know, and they were so pleased. It's just just a really lovely read. As I say, these are old books, you know, they are old. You can tell that in the style of writing and the words that are used and the things that the people are doing. They're not based on modern day life, but they're just very good. So very good. So I wanted to just talk to you about those, really. They're kind of like my recommendations. These kind of books are not the only kind of books that I would read to my children. Obviously, we read Shakespeare, Charles Dickens, Jane Austen, but we also read the modern books. You know, we're not opposed to Roald Dahl, David Walliams, Michael Morpurgo. These are all fantastic authors, modern day authors that we enjoy greatly, and they have a place in our home, and the children are encouraged to read them themselves, or I will read them to them as well. When I'm suggesting these particular books, that is in no way to say that these modern day authors have lost the ability to write in a way that I want to read to my child. I've chosen these ones specifically because they are older books, and I think that it's important to remember that just because a book is old doesn't mean that it doesn't have lessons in it for our children. Thank you for that, River. Thank you. Yes, just because a book is old doesn't mean that it holds no value anymore. Some of the best books ever written, you know, the Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings, so on, you know, some of these books are timeless, and I think it's important to be eclectic with your reading choices, and to allow your child to read a wide variety of books, and that is certainly what we are trying to encourage in our home. So until next time, take care.